So I've put back up the screen share because we have kind of bypassed the legislative updates. We'll wait for Calvin to circle back around, but might as well give a brief recap of the legislative updates. I'd like to point out that the CARES Act provides $100 million in additional funds to USDA Reconnect program, and it also makes $200 million available to rural telehealth and provides $5 million in grants to museums and libraries for devices and support. This is all in the PowerPoint, obviously, that I've recently shared with you. But moreover, it allots $30 billion to states for schools' use in support of online learning. There are a number of bills which I didn't include that have emerged, and both the federal and the state bills tend to fall into two categories. They would be providing additional funding and diminishing barriers to deployment of broadband. Those are the types of legislation that I've been following. So you can read the text on the page about HR 6723, and I will move to the next slide, which revisits the legislation that we discussed at our last quarterly meeting, the mapping accuracy, which Kathy alluded to earlier, as well as the Deployment Accuracy and Technology Availability Act, or DATA Act. And there are two leanings within the FCC with regard to some of this sort of legislation. One would be that more funding and as quickly as possible is the right approach. The other leaning is that getting accurate mapping and the data which supports deployment and directs the finances strategically would be a more sensible approach. So that in brief covers some of the federal legislation that we're tracking. The state updates, we are following 1130 as well as SB 1206, which has to do with micro trenching and streamlining the permitting process for that. And subsequent slides have a little more detail on each of these. AB 1366 is the Office of Emergency Service Coordination and Communication, as well as a land use permitting wireless communications bill, AB 2421. And so I don't have to read the text in its entirety for each of these bills. I'll just flip through each of these slides. And I think that my notation at the bottom might be, even though I set it up yesterday, might be a little delayed. I'd like to point out that this bill provides more or redefines some of the CASF mandates so that it provides additional funding. And it has the support of our Senator Mike McGuire in past votes when it came before committees. Here again is text from the micro trenching, and it gives a reference to the section. So if Brent Schultz wants to know more about how the state might be preempting local decisions, he can take note of that if he hasn't already been tracking the bill. And as of this time, it has been read a second time and referred to the Rules Committee, but neither of our local representatives have voted on it. A little bit more of a mystery is AB 1366, which was a gut and amend, and the text you see in front of you is largely, it replaces 10 pages of documentation about what AB 1366 previously was with the information that you see. It is essentially, if enacted, it is empowering next-gen 911 emergency communication systems to govern how emergency services are provided. And if I would open it up to questions as I leave this slide for your review on AB 2421. or we can patch back into Calvin if he has more to add.
He just left. He said his phone died.
Thank you for that, Tom. And so that is a brief update of the legislation that I'm tracking. I will take it off screen share and give it back to the chair.
Could I suggest that Senator McGuire put a bill in? I think it's Senate Bill 1302. It has to do with infrastructure underground. It's primarily about power, but I think that it's relevant to broadband. If we're concerned about wildfires and disasters and so forth, not only do we need the power underground, we need the broadband underground.
Thank you, Tom. I believe that Taylor Morrison spoke to that at our previous meeting, but I will keep it on the list. I don't know why it was. Yeah. Appreciate the input.
Jeff, thank you for tracking the bills. It occurs to me that, you know, that every Board of Supervisors meeting, they have that legislative platform discussion. How are we interfacing? How are you interfacing on behalf of the committee to that agenda?
It's been a challenge. I mean, I should be more forceful with regard to trying to get input to the agenda on those matters. They have a full agenda regularly, and the issue in the current state is that legislation moving forward is quite stilted at the state level. So it's a bit of a question as to what will be enacted and how much the actual legislation might be stalled, as well as input from our local representatives. I mean, they're always available, and that is appreciated. But insight into how legislation is moving forward in the current circumstance is a question. Work will be done, and I will pursue that. Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, so the way that works is if it's already in the county's legislative platform, staff can write a letter of support without having to get it passed by the board. So feel free to use that. Sarah Duquette is the best contact. And if you want anything, if you want her to include any pending state bills, just get it to her about 7 days before the meeting.
Thank you.
And if you want to CC me, I can make sure it actually there's follow through.
Thanks. I just haven't burdened the Board of Supervisors and the Executive Office with some of these details, but there is, at some point, I would really appreciate a check-in with regard to how we might want to amend that platform. Thank you.